We've seen it time and time again on the big screen. A soldier is walking along when he hears a faint click or feels something under his foot. He stepped on a landmine. Now, as long as he stays still and maintains pressure on the mine... Oh my god, that is not what usually happens in the movies, but that is how landmines work in real life. There's an extremely common trope in movies. Somebody steps on a landmine and has to continue standing on it because, of course, if they stepped off, it would explode. The only thing is, landmines do not really work like that. No standard landmine that you would realistically encounter in the world is triggered by stepping off of it rather than onto it. I posted a short video explaining this about 2 years ago, and as you can imagine, viewers were very excited to learn something new that challenged their existing views. Nah, just kidding. I got bombarded by hundreds of comments telling me that I was wrong. That's when I realized this myth was way more prevalent than I ever thought. In fact, I would guess that many of you watching this might still be skeptical of my claim, but stick around, I'll explain. After posting that short clip, I knew I had to make a full-length video explaining this myth in more detail. So what did I do? Well, I procrastinated for 2 full years, and then last week I remembered the idea and started writing this video. Today, I'll tell you all about this landmine misconception, including how it may have started, why it's wrong, and some of the real-life mines that have contributed to people believing this myth. I think the best place to start would be with the origins of this myth, which dates back to at least World War II. But first, I'd like to quickly thank Wooks for sponsoring this video and supporting my work on this page. Wooks is an outdoor gear company headquartered in Hickory, North Carolina that offers stocks, chassis, knives, and axes made from real wood, not composites. Check out my Remington 870 before and after I put a Wooks Gladiator kit on it. It's like a whole new gun now. Their products have distinctive, timeless designs, and they're made to perform with superior manufacturing technology and raw natural materials sourced in a sustainable manner. Wooks describes themselves as the wild child of Manelli Group, an Italian company started in 1937 that's considered one of the finest wood machining companies in the world. I think that old school vibe really comes through in their products, and I don't think that's any surprise that that would appeal to me. Go check them out through the link in the description, and when you find something you love, use code WWW10 at checkout to get 10% off your order. Alright, now back to the origins of this landmine misconception. As far as I can tell, the earliest and most relevant example of this idea that landmines are triggered when you step off of them was during World War II. During the war and in the years leading up to it, the Germans were developing all types of new landmines with different fuses that could set them off in different ways. This constant stream of new devices meant that many Allied soldiers didn't fully understand the specifics of all the German mines they were up against. They were also constantly hearing stories about different types of unconventional mines and booby traps from soldiers who had encountered them. Soldiers heard about things like mines made of wood or glass that couldn't be detected by minesweepers, mines that were rigged to explode if you tried to remove them from the ground, and even things like booby-trapped hand grenades that would explode the second they were activated without the usual delay. Those things were all true, but with so many different stories being passed around, it's likely there was some misinformation being spread among the troops as well, specifically about one of the most feared German anti-personnel mines, the S-mine, better known by Allied troops as the Bouncing Betty. This was a bounding mine, meaning that once it was activated, the mine would launch up in the air about 3 to 7 feet, then detonate in the air, launching 320 steel balls flying in all directions that could travel up to 200 yards. The mine could use a number of different fuses to set it off, including a pressure-activated fuse, a tripwire pull fuse, an electronic fuse, and a tripwire pull-release fuse. That last one would set off the mine if somebody pulled the tripwire, but it would also detonate if someone cut the tripwire and tension was released. Even though that fuse is super interesting, the one relevant to today's discussion is the pressure-activated fuse. This fuse would be activated when only 10 pounds or more was applied to the 3 prongs at the top of the fuse. As soon as sufficient pressure was applied, a striker would be released, hitting a percussion cap. The cap would detonate, igniting a slow-burning 4.5-second delay pellet inside the mine. After that 4.5-second delay, the pellet would ignite a charge that would shoot the inner portion of the mine up in the air, where it would explode like I described previously. I believe that a large portion of this myth comes from that 4.5-second delay used on this mine. It's natural to think that some soldiers may have stepped on that mine, then stepped off of it during that 4.5-second delay before it exploded. That soldier who stepped on the mine and anyone else who was around witnessed the mine explode once they stepped off of it. But in reality, it was triggered when the soldier stepped onto it, and that 4.5-second delay made it seem like it didn't explode until pressure was released from the mine. Of course, now we know that's not how the fuses really worked. Reportedly, this caused some rumors among soldiers that if you stepped on an S-mine, you should continue holding your foot on it because it would explode if you removed pressure from it. In reality, this was a terrible idea. If you stepped on an S-mine and tried to hold your foot on it, the mine would already be triggered, and 4.5 seconds later, that powerful lifting charge would detonate, probably blowing your foot off. Then you'll be right next to the mine when the main charge detonates, and you'll probably get a bunch of steel balls embedded in you. Not ideal. In reality, if you noticed you stepped on one of these, your best bet was to dive on the ground and try to protect your vital organs. Hopefully, most of the shrapnel would pass overhead and you would survive the encounter, but that was no guarantee. Funny enough, this is depicted somewhat accurately in a lot of video games, like Call of Duty World War II, where you can lie on the ground to avoid being killed by German S-mines. This misunderstanding about how German S-mines work continues to this day. When I posted that short video I referenced earlier where I explained that standing on a landmine won't prevent it from exploding, many people referenced the S-mine specifically, mistakenly believing that it was pressure release activated, even though that's objectively not true. I think that all this confusion about how different landmines worked during World War II led to a belief among some people after the war that many landmines really didn't explode until you stepped off of them. I even remember hearing a story once about a Vietnam vet who stepped on a landmine, and when it didn't go off, he stood on it while his friends strapped a bunch of flak jackets to him. Then they quickly tugged him off the mine using a rope attached to a jeep to try to minimize his injuries. They thought that as soon as he stepped off the mine, it would explode. In reality, him stepping off of the mine wouldn't have triggered it, and it was probably just a dud to begin with. I heard that story secondhand, so take it with a grain of salt, but I do think that demonstrates that some people really held this belief. This misconception about mines exploded in popularity after it was depicted in a long list of different films and TV shows. Sorry about that dumb pun of mine. I hope you're not triggered by bad jokes, because that one would really set you off.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Okay, enough mine puns. I'll talk later in the video about why movies choose to depict mines in this way, but now I think we should talk about some of the real-life mines that have contributed to confusion about this subject. We already talked about how the time delay on the S-mine caused confusion about how mines work, and that could probably be said about other time delay mines as well. But there are other landmines that have similarly contributed to misconceptions over the years because people don't fully understand how they work. The next type of mine we should cover is anti-handling devices. Why are these mines relevant to this myth about mines not exploding until you step off of them? Well, many mines in this category are pressure release activated. Gasp! Pressure release activated? Well, that would mean that if you stepped onto it, it wouldn't explode until you stepped off of it, right? No. These anti-handling devices are meant to explode not when someone walks over them, but when someone disturbs an object that's resting on top of the mine. The most common use for these is to place them underneath a conventional landmine. Many anti-handling devices, like the Russian MS-3 mine, were specifically designed for this purpose. The idea is, when you're laying landmines, you place an anti-handling device underneath another landmine. That way, if the enemy detects that landmine and tries to dig it up and remove it, as soon as they lift it, that anti-handling device will explode and kill or injure whoever's trying to remove that mine. To be honest, it's extremely terrifying. It's like a landmine on a landmine. As I mentioned, many of these anti-handling devices use pressure release fuses. That fuse is activated as soon as that other landmine or whatever other object is resting on top of the anti-handling device is lifted. Even though a lot of these were designed to target troops who are removing landmines, they can be used for a ton of other applications as well. For example, if you thought the enemy might capture the building you're in, you might put an ammo box or something else on top of an anti-handling device in hopes that those enemy soldiers would come in and pick that object up, setting off the mine. You may be thinking that this could work like the ones in the movies. If a soldier planted one of these anti-handling devices in the ground like a regular landmine, then someone could walk by and step on it and then it wouldn't explode until they stepped off, right? Well, again, no. This is another common misunderstanding about how these mines work. These pressure release fuses typically can't be armed until a heavy object is already resting on top of the mine. After all, I don't think any soldiers would want to use a landmine that you have to arm first and then set a heavy object on top of. That'd be pretty dangerous, and I don't think they'd be too happy about that. So let's quickly talk about the MS-3 mine to understand just one example of how some of these mines work. As far as I understand, to arm the MS-3 mine, you first have to place an object on top of it that weighs at least 10 pounds. Then you pull the pin with the object still resting on the mine. After that, the mine has an arming delay so that the soldiers placing the mines can finish burying it and camouflage it without having to worry about blowing themselves up. The activation time for the MS-3 mine depends on temperature, but from what I found, it typically arms itself in about 5 to 40 minutes. So then no, it's not possible that you could step onto one of these mines and have it explode when you step off of it like we see in the movies. For that to happen, you would have to step on the unarmed mine, then pull the pin while you're still standing on it, then continue to stand on it for up to 40 minutes, and then step off of it, causing the mine to explode. I don't think anyone would do that, nor do I think anyone would lay unarmed mines in the hopes that the enemy would step on them and then pull the pins themselves. Oftentimes, I think people hear that pressure release mines exist in the real world, and then just assume that they must work like the ones they've seen in movies. But in real life, pressure release mines are completely different, and they're used for those applications that we discussed. Now, this video is focused on anti-personnel mines. Those are mines targeted at people because that's what we typically see in these movies. But I think anti-vehicle mines are worth covering briefly as well. I've heard many people claim that even though anti-personnel mines don't work at all like the ones in the movies, that actually is how anti-vehicle mines work, where pressure is released from them and then they explode. That claim also isn't true. After all, why would a landmine wait for a tank to drive off of it and then explode? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. From my research, I can't find any anti-vehicle mines that work like that. I think some of the confusion about this comes from certain types of anti-vehicle landmines that have to have pressure applied to them more than once before they'll detonate. A good example of this is the M608 double impulse fuse for the M15 landmine. The mine is designed to detonate the second time that a vehicle drives over it. This type of fuse could be useful in many different situations. For example, you could put this mine in the road and the first enemy vehicle that drove over it would be completely unharmed. This would cause a false sense of security for the following vehicles who would then be blown up by the mine. And then that first vehicle is stuck. If it tries to turn around and drive back over mines that it already contacted once, it'll set them off. There are just so many different types of landmines and fuses out there that no one person could fully understand all of them. And that definitely includes me. For that reason, I can't definitively 100% say that a landmine that works just like the ones in the movies, where it explodes if you step off of it, has never been designed. In fact, I'd be kind of surprised if nobody had ever tried to design a mine like this. But mines that work in that way just aren't used. Sure, there might be some prototype or obscure design for a landmine out there that works in this way, but it's just not something you would encounter in the real world the way they do in the movies. I have searched far and wide for a landmine design that works just like the Hollywood ones, and after looking at hundreds of different landmines, I haven't even found anything close. After I posted that one short video covering this topic, I even asked my viewers to help me find a landmine that works the way the ones in movies do. People confidently shared the names of dozens of specific landmines that they thought function the way the ones in movies do, only for me to actually research them and find out that people were completely mistaken about how these mines work. At the end of the day, it just doesn't make sense to design a mine that functions like this. These mines are designed to inflict casualties. Why would they purposefully design a mine that allows you to stand on it while your buddies clear the area and you try to disarm the mine? It makes way more sense to design a mine that if you notice you've stepped on it, it's already too late for you and anyone else nearby. So if you still don't want to take my word for it that this is a myth, the Swiss Mine Clearing Foundation even had to release an article on this topic explaining that this is complete Hollywood fiction and that it can even be dangerous misinformation for people who live in areas that are plagued by landmines. Okay, so if we know this Hollywood trope is complete fiction, why do so many movies choose to depict landmines in this inaccurate manner? Well, newsflash, these movies are fictional. This idea of someone being trapped standing on a landmine that'll explode if they step off of it is very suspenseful, and it's a great plot device. The people making these movies aren't trying to make an instructional film about how landmines work. They're trying to tell an entertaining story. These Hollywood writers probably don't care that much about a minor inaccuracy like this in their movies, and that's if they even know it's inaccurate to begin with. Now sure, I would love for the next big World War II movie to include a super accurate depiction of what it looks like to step on an S-mine, but I don't think the general audiences care about the accuracy of things like that. With that said, if some Hollywood producer is watching this video by chance, please cast me as a guy who gets blown up by a landmine in your next movie. It's a role I was born to play. I'm hoping that my explanation in today's video helps clear up this landmine myth once and for all. Thank you all so much for watching my explanation today. If you learned something, please consider supporting my work by buying one of my awesome World War II nose art shirts or becoming a member on Patreon. Links for both of those things are in the description below. Other than that, please don't step on a landmine because I'll see you all in the next one.